So, the bow in Dying Light 2 is actually pretty broken. You can one-shot volatiles on hard difficulty if you're lucky. I've been tinkering with the bow or a ranger build, and here is how you can live out your Legolas fantasy in the zombie apocalypse. Let's go! Hey, this video is brought to you by our latest member, Gabrielle Iodero. If you want to join the membership program, there's that little blue button down below that says join. Click that button, see the different benefits that we have. Now let's get into the video. For this build, you're going to need a bow and obviously some arrows to go with that bow. And all you have to really do is shoot the bad guys with those arrows. It's pretty self-explanatory, but what makes the bow fun is the different arrow types that you can use, and each have their own effects, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Some of them are more useful than others. And basically the way you play this build is by stealthing around to start the combat, headshot as many enemies as possible with as many arrow effects as you can, and then clean up whatever's left with melee or just stay at ranged if you can manage to clean them up without getting too close. One of the bow's best strengths is that you can kill the sleeping infected in buildings without waking nearby infected, as it barely makes a sound. And once you're strong enough to one-shot those enemies, you can clear the dark zone areas during the day without any much trouble, because you can just kill them all and keep moving forward. Now let's talk about weapons, and you will obviously need a bow for this build, and in my experience the only way to find a bow is after you have left Old Villanor, as enemies start having bows themselves to use against you, and I found one very quickly after this point. Your mileage may vary though, you may find one much earlier than I did, but any old bow will do. There's no mods for bows as well, so once you've got one, you're pretty much good to go. You can find stronger bows throughout the game, but it's all RNG based unless you align the city with the Peacekeepers, and at rank 4 you get the craftable crossbow and bolts to use instead. And this is a good route as well if you want to go the other option, but I went the survivor route and I'm just using a bow that I found out in the wild. Now let's talk about the arrows, because that's the fun part. And there are plenty of different elemental arrows, and in my experience I like these three the best. And the first one is the shock arrows. These are perfect for if there's lots of virals or infected or something, anything coming towards you, and you can hit them with a shock arrow, and this will send shock waves out to the other virals or whoever it may be and slow them all down so that you can get more distance between you to keep firing arrows, or even just keep firing shock arrows, because they do deal a plenty amount of damage on their own. I also like the exploding arrows to kill packs as well, especially if you're just the biters, the standard infected. If they're all grouped up, you just throw an exploding arrow at their feet. It'll break most of their feet, so they'll just crawl around. It just gets rid of that pack very simply. And my next is the infected arrows, and this turns humans into infected and just creates general chaos. So you can use this on any human, wait a few seconds after you have done it, and it will turn them into an infected. If you do this in a camp or any other areas where there's lots of human enemies, they will turn on that human and it will create a bit of a chaos to allow you to stealth around and do whatever you want to do in that area for free. There are other ones like the toxic and the laceration, but this is up to you, whatever you want to use. But these are the three that I primarily use, other than the default arrows that you get. As all the different arrow types are craftable, make sure you are checking the craft master so you can unlock all the different types. Once you've got them all, you are basically good to go. There's no upgrades for the different arrows. Once you've just got the recipe to craft it, you're basically good to go. Now let's talk about skills, and there are 4 main skills that you need for a ranger build. The first is the precise aiming, and this will allow you to zoom in like a aim down sights with the crossbow. The next is the power shot, which adds armor piercing and additional damage to all ranged weapon shots. What this will mean is if you headshot a zombie or infected, it will go through that infected to another infected or to whatever target is next to it, so you can actually kill multiple with just the one arrow. The next is the parkour shot, which will allow you to do a slow motion when you're free running, jumping off things, but I personally haven't used this skill as I don't see the point of it, as for the most part you can just sit somewhere, whether it's on higher ground or just away from the fight, and just rain arrows on them and they will never even notice that you're there. The next is the serial shot, and this one is a little complicated and it's not very clear as how to use it. Essentially what it does say is that it will mark 3 targets and fire a projectile at all 3 targets just for firing the one arrow, except there's no actual reticule or any UI indicator that you have marked a target. The best way that I've found this to occur is just when you are aiming down sights with precise aiming, it's just to hover over one of the target's heads for a second, then move to the next target, do the same, and then the next one, do the same, and then fire. If you give too much time in between that hovering, it will not hit all 3 targets. It may only hit 1, it may hit 2, but it's just really moving the reticule targeter from 1 to the other, and just leaving it linger for, half a second or so, and you will actually notice this will occur. You can also use this with elemental arrows as well. So say you want to apply fire effects to an infected, you can just linger on these infected, then fire it. You will apply that effect to multiple infected. For your attributes, stamina over health in every single build, but especially in this build, because holding an arrow actually uses up your stamina. So if you're aiming down sights, holding an arrow, trying to line up that perfect shot, you want to make sure you've got plenty of stamina to use so you can hold that arrow for as long as possible, as well as keep firing arrows when you are in the middle of combat. The gear set that we are using for this build is obviously the Ranger set, and you can just go full Ranger here. You don't have to worry about tinkering with any of the other types. The main benefits from the other types don't benefit the Ranger, as we're not using any of the melee weapons or parkour attacks really. So the medic, the brawler, and the tank sets aren't very valuable for the most part. You're going to be staying at a range distance and just raining death down upon them. The Ranger set boosts your range damage as well as your parkour stamina, your survival sense, and your stealth. They're the four main categories that the Ranger set does boost, and for the most part, the range damage is the key focus there. And once you start getting some of the better gear and buffing your range damage, you can one-shot pretty much everything in the game just with a standard arrow. It makes most of the combat relatively trivial. Some tips for playing this build is that, as mentioned before, the bow makes very little sound. You can kill infected and humans very easily from a distance, rain death down upon them. This also makes some of the fights in the game very trivial, as enemies aren't accustomed to you being able to kill them from such a distance. They often won't attack you back, so you can sit somewhere safely and just kill people with arrows and not really have to engage with them if that's the way you want to play. It also makes some of the boss fights like the GRE anomalies much easier, as they're accustomed to you trying to run at them. They will just kind of move around and throw stuff at you, and you just dodge that thing and fire arrows at them. Very simple. It's also worth mentioning that you should be scavenging all of the time with this build, because we're going to be crafting a whole lot of arrows and it uses a lot of your crafting resources. You're going to be scavenging everything, always picking things up, making sure that you've got plenty of resources. When you go to vendors, you can buy some of the crafting resources from them as well. It just makes that process easier, so you don't have to go and hunt things down yourself. You should still be doing that as you are exploring and hunting things down and getting them. The elemental effects on your bow are perfect for dealing with the volatiles. You can take them out at range before they get to you, which is their main thing, is once they actually get to you, they will do a few attacks and then one-shot you regardless of your health. If you can avoid them coming to you, it just makes that process so much easier, because you can shock them, you can do all sorts of elemental effects on them to keep them away from you. In some cases, you can just one-shot them as well with the bow from a distance once you have upgraded it. Because with this build, we're not using a whole lot of weapon mods or anything, you don't need to worry about upgrading them. You can actually use it to upgrade throwables, something like the Molotov or the throwable knives, or any of the other throwables that you do enjoy using. I personally have upgraded my throwable knives, because once you get to a certain point, the knife will deal heavy stagger to any enemy type, including the volatiles. So if they are coming to you in melee range, you can actually stagger them with the throwable knife. When it does that heavy stagger, they could be halfway through an attack animation, they'll stagger. You can either use your bow then, you can use a melee weapon, you can use anything to just start killing them and just keep interrupting them when they try and attack, and they become very trivial very quickly once you get to this point. And my last tip for you is to go check out my brawler build, which goes through a brawler one-handed weapon build, which is a perfect build if you prefer melee compared to range like this build. Thank you for watching this video till the end. Thank you to our members for supporting the channel. My name is Norza, and I hope you have a great day.